Hello and welcome! I'm Michelle Anderson, founder of Clarinet Mentors, and today I want to share with you a warm-up exercise that you can do probably in about 10 minutes or more, depending on how much patience you have, that can really improve your tone and smoothness of playing. This is something that's really made a big difference in my playing. So think about it. Would you be willing to spend even 5 minutes a day in your practice routine to do something that would really make your tone more warm and more resonant and kind of allow you to move between the notes more easily? I know for me it's worth it. Having said that, I learned about this warm-up years ago, and because it's not very glamorous, it's not very exciting, sometimes I just forget about it and I tend to put it aside and I forget how valuable it is. But I've been experimenting with it for the last couple of weeks, and wow, do I really appreciate the benefits of this in my playing. So let me say, it's not glamorous, it's not exciting, but if you're willing to stick with it for at least 2 weeks, I think you're going to notice a difference. So let's dive into it. There's a worksheet you can download in the write-up underneath this video. There's a link that writes out what we're about to do. I learned this from one of my influential teachers, Bill Jackson, who I think is one of the greatest teachers around. And what I've done here is sort of written it out so that it's very easily available to you to try it out. So there are many purposes to this warm-up, but basically what it is taking a scale and playing it incredibly slowly. And by incredibly slowly, I mean we're going to play one octave, one direction in whole notes. So every single note gets 4 beats. And the way, if I remember correctly, that Bill taught this is to try and do it as slowly as you can to play 8 notes in one breath. Now the goal here isn't to pass out and see how far you can go. It's can you do it in one breath, maintaining really good support, but pushing yourself a little bit. So you need to decide where that is. On the worksheet, I suggest you try starting at 88 as a starting point. And if you find you're just running out of air, go faster. If you find that really easy, go slower. It's up to you to pick your tempo for this exercise. Now you might think, playing a scale really slowly, how's that going to help my clarinet tone? Well, the way it helps your clarinet tone is that you're going to be very mindful of creating some great clarinet habits while you're doing this very slow exercise. And there are a few different things I want you to think about. So the way the worksheet is written, we go through every single major scale, starting with the lowest note on clarinet, E major. And basically, we play an E major scale in whole notes for 1 octave, and then we take 8 beats to rest. This is kind of to let our air reset. We take a big breath, and then we go down the scale. We get 8 beats to rest, and we go up a semitone. So now we're doing an F major scale. Now for some of you, you're going to look at this worksheet and see lots of sharps and lots of flats and think, I can't play that. That's too hard. Well, so here's what I'll say to you. At first, don't worry about playing those scales that are unfamiliar to you. Pick the ones that look easy, that have notes you know, just to get started on this routine, because everything else I'm going to talk about today will show you how you can use it to improve your playing. However, what I will say is even if there's lots of sharps and flats that you haven't learned before, because your fingers move so slowly and you have time to think about it, this is a great way to learn those other scales. So I would say if they're new scales for you, just pick one new one that looks a bit challenging and work on it for a week or so. After a week of doing this, that scale's going to feel pretty familiar. And your goal can be to, over a couple months, get comfortable with all of the scales here. Now the worksheet that you'll see here just takes us through 1 octave of each scale, although I think the E major scale repeats. What Bill recommends doing with his more advanced students is continuing on up the octaves so that you do each scale at least 2 octaves. Now that could easily take 20 to 30 minutes at one time, and that's recommended for people who are practicing 3 hours a day. Now you might not be practicing that much, so you just want to adapt it to how long you're practicing. But I would say if you could just commit to doing at least 5 minutes of this exercise and doing it really well, you're going to notice a difference. Here's the things to think about while you're doing this scale. I like to do it standing up. Right now I'm standing. Usually I film these YouTube videos sitting down, and I like to look in a mirror. So off camera right now, but right where I'm pointing, I have a big mirror. And that's a crucial part of my studio because I use it when I'm practicing, and I'll often have my students stand up and look in the mirror because there's lots of things we can learn about our playing from watching. So while I'm playing a slow scale, I'm going to just look at my shoulders. If I see tension like this that I know is going to be interfering with my air, I relax them. So maybe before I start, I'm looking in the mirror. I might even raise my shoulders and just let them go. I'm also looking at my hand position. Now I have other videos on the ideal hand and wrist position for clarinet, and I'll put some links in the video below just so you can reference that if you're not sure what you should look for with your hands. The real quick version is we want our fingers to be arched, and what we want to avoid is this shape where we're flattening that knuckle. We want them arched like we would do if we were making little crab puppets like this, little hand puppets. We also want as much as possible for our elbow to forearm to wrist to hand to be in a straight line. We don't want to see our wrists bent in or out when we play. So usually that means our elbows just rest, instead of sticking out kind of chicken dance style, our elbows are going to rest right at our side. So we're going to have relaxed elbows, relaxed arms, rounded fingers. When we switch notes, one of the primary goals of this exercise is to move from one note to the next note absolutely smoothly. We want our tone to be the most beautiful sound that we can produce. And when we switch notes, a real common thing to happen is that we get a bump in the sound. We'll kind of be playing one note and then there'll be a bump in the sound. That bump can either come from our air accenting the note, or perhaps right before we switch notes, our air kind of backed off and then we gave it a fresh start. So it's our air not being smooth. It's also fingers slamming down on the key. So this is a chance for you to imagine that your fingers are in a big vat of like honey. So here I am trying to move my hand through honey, which means they have to move slowly. So that's what I want you to think about when you're doing this. Your fingers go very slowly. And so I'm looking in the mirror. I'm focusing on my air being absolutely steady. I'm listening to the intervals as I change notes. And the last thing that's really important to think about, because it definitely contributes greatly to our concept of playing with the world's most beautiful tone, is how we use our blowing and breathing muscles. And again, I'm going to put a link to some other videos that will get into this in more detail if it's not something that you're familiar with. But again, the short form is that for some reason on clarinet, even though this is contrary to a way that many people are taught, I encourage you to try it because it really does seem to work. For some reason when we play clarinet, if we take our ab muscles right around our belly button and push them outward as we blow, it seems to help us create a nice fast airstream that activates the reed really well, gets it vibrating, and helps us produce better sound. So as I'm playing those long tones, I'm kind of conscious of these muscles sort of pushing in an outward direction. And I have some other training videos. I'll put a link below that will give you more information on that. But that's what we do. Now, this seems like lots to think about at once. We're thinking about our blowing muscles. We're thinking about our fingers moving in slow motion. We're thinking about our posture being relaxed. And it is. And personally, I can't think of all of that at once, and I don't even try. You don't want to be overwhelmed. This is an easy exercise. I'll start the exercise thinking about just one of them. It might be, let's just watch my fingers. And I'll just go through the first octave, really paying attention to my fingers. If I notice they're smacking down, I might pause. You don't have to keep going through the exercise if you notice something you want to correct. Let's say I'm going from D to C and I notice this finger really smacks down. Well, then I might just try that interval, going back into my big vat of honey, until I feel like my fingers are nice and relaxed, and then I'll continue on with the scale. So first time I think of fingers. The next time I might say, okay, now I'm just, as I go into the next scale in the exercise, I'm really going to focus on my breathing. So really pushing the air out. So I keep changing my focus. Now what you'll find is that after you've done this exercise for a week or two, that you start to incorporate a lot of these good habits almost naturally. And that's our goal. We want these habits to become so much part of us that we're doing it when we're playing all of our repertoire and other things later. in that case, I'm just really looking for things that I notice are awry. So it might be, that note sounds really good. Oh boy, that note, that must have been a finger thing. Oh, maybe that was an air thing. So we go through it. And when I do this, anytime I change notes and it doesn't sound smooth, I stop and I repeat that interval until it's good. So that might mean this is where we stray a bit from trying to do the whole scale in one breath. If I'm stopping to work on it, I might play 2 notes back and forth 5 or 6 times, obviously breathing where I need to, and then I might restart that scale or simply carry on. It's really up to you. The idea is that I find I almost go into a Zen-like trance. This is kind of like clarinet yoga or clarinet meditation with incredibly good results. So we're moving so slowly, we really can use our brain to focus. Let me demonstrate a little bit of what that might look like. I have my metronome here. For the purposes of this exercise, I'm going to set it to 92 beats per minute. Let me just say, if you don't have your own metronome, they're so handy. There's lots of free online metronomes you can just turn your computer on. There's lots, I just have my phone handy here. There's lots of apps where you can turn it on. It'll give you your pulse. I'm going to set it to 92 right now, which is a little bit on the fast side, but that might also be a comfortable starting speed for you. So as I play this, I'm going to kind of listen to this beat. And for right now, I'm just going to play the very, very beginning of the worksheet. I'm starting on low E. So here's how I would do this. I'm looking in the mirror, making sure my shoulders are relaxed, making sure my fingers are arched. When I breathe in, I'm going to take a big breath and I'm going to think about pushing that air out. And I'm going to move from note to note. And let's say that my fingers aren't very smooth as I go along here. If I notice that, I'm going to just stop and work on that interval. And right there, my fingers had a little fuffle of some kind. And also, I had a little bit of accent on my second note. I almost stopped, but I thought, no, maybe I'll go a little bit further. So something went funny on the A to B. Maybe I'll just try those 2 notes. That's starting to sound better. So it's just a matter of making sure my fingers are in slow motion and that I'm really focusing on smooth air. Then I might restart the scale. Now that time I'd go, was that a little smoother? Yeah, my finger was lighter, but it was almost too light. The note didn't speak well. So this is the type of analysis we can have of our own playing. Eventually, we get it so that it feels smooth and we just go through the whole thing. Now I would get 8 beats of rest. And I would go back down. So you see how it goes. Now, because I was speaking during that rest, I probably didn't have time to take the big normal breath that I would. Now, as I said, this is not a glamorous exercise. You might be watching that going, that looks kind of boring. She's just playing a slow scale. How is that going to help my clarinet playing? That might be what you're wondering. It does. Just I guess what I'll say is this, if you're willing to put in 5 minutes, 10 minutes would be even better a day for 2 weeks and just see if you notice a difference, do it. Now, having said that, if you just play a slow scale with kind of bad tone and kind of bad fingers every day, you're not going to see any benefits. You're just going to be practicing those bad habits. So really be mindful of your air moving incredibly fast and smoothly, your fingers being gentle, and you might not want to start on the E major scale. If you're a more advanced player, for sure, do that, you might want to pick an easier scale. You might want to start on the second scale, the F scale, where we're just lifting one finger at a time. At first, you just want to do something where really it's fairly easy with what your fingers are doing, so you can fine tune them. You don't want to be focusing on learning new fingerings at first. You want to be focusing on the finger position and the gentleness, and especially how smooth it is. So the things to listen for are a gap in the sound, might be something like this. There was a little fade out between the notes, and then the second note jumped out, or a note that jumps out. An accent. Sometimes the accent is air, sometimes it's fingers. You need to decide which one it is, and it doesn't really matter as long as we go back and forth and get it sounding smooth. So this really helps build smoothness into your fingering. And I find, as I said, I've been doing this the last couple of weeks, that now when I just pick up my clarinet and start working on the repertoire that I'm working on, certain intervals are just coming out way more easily than I'm accustomed to. And I'm sure it's because I'm doing this warm-up. So I really want you to try this. I hope it works. Sometimes as a player, just like any sport, you know, if we're a tennis player, they're probably just serving onto a wall many, many times to perfect their serve so that when they're in the tournament, they're getting those aces. This is what you have to do. This is your kind of backup physical training stuff, the things you do behind the scenes that will then allow you to be dazzling when you're playing in front of the audience, or sitting in your church band, or in your community band, or wherever you choose to play your clarinet, or even if it's just for your family. So I hope you enjoy this video. I would love to hear from you. There's a comments box underneath here. Please put in your comments if this works for you, if you have questions about it, or if you have other clarinet questions. I go into YouTube about once a week and I answer the comments and questions that are there, and I really love to hear from you. And I have an invitation for you. If you're not already a member of my Clarinet Mentors community, it's totally free to join. www.learnclarinetnow.com. And as a member of my community, I send out a newsletter every few weeks, and it has an educational video like today's, something that I really think will help you as a clarinetist. And it also will have resources that I find really valuable. It might be reeds or ligatures or mouthpieces, equipment. It could be some music that I found, that printed music, that's a great resource, or some kind of other clarinet gadget, or recording that's really exciting, or some special clarinet event. Whatever it is, I love sharing things with the Clarinet Mentors community that I think are helpful to you. You can also unsign up super easily. If it's not a good fit for you, every time I send out a newsletter, there's an unsubscribe link, so really there's no commitment on your part, other than because you're already here, I know you like playing the clarinet, and I know you want to play better. So I hope this will be of use to you. Thanks so much, and I look forward to seeing you on our next video. Until then, enjoy your clarinet, focus on those great habits, and I'll see you soon.